Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jardula here.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Johnny Sue is on the ones and twos. I don't know why you got to laugh. We got to make sure we do that every time, because once we go like, whatchamacallit, podcast, and we put it up there and people are listening,
yeah,
they need to hear who it is, fam.
I guess so. You're right.
So you have to say, and I'm Fiorella, welcome or something. Like, you have to get more jovial.
Yeah, no, Pasta. No, I don't do tricks. Okay.
I'm just asking for a little bit more jovialness.
No,
That's it.
No.
Guys, thank you for everybody who jumped in today. Got 63 people on the YouTubes. We're not there. You probably can hear us, but can you see us?
Can you see us?
Boom, we're here. La da da.
Is it?
Really?
You serious?
One of those days.
It's one
deep
of those
state.
days where nothing is working, you guys. Give us a second.
Can you hear us though? The
Okay.
mystery couch.
The ghost couch. We put on the cloak, the invisible cloak from Harry Potter. If you guys have read Harry Potter, you know what I'm talking about. I need one of those to get to Congress because the squat has proven, unfortunately, all of us right. Who told you this was a PR stunt? We're going to talk about that.
Many PR stunts, fam.
Many PR stunts. There's a lot
Theater.
of lies that we have happening lately. But you guys, we told everybody that this, I mean, we even talked about the legal part about the Supreme Court using this. We even brought up an article that actually mentioned it. Hey, by the way, this might be illegal because the CDC, blah, blah, blah. We talked about that. And then, of course, less than a month later, this shit happens.
SWB audio capture,
it's sad.
not registered.
It's sad. And all those people, I know Franco was on, all these people need to go and send Franco an apology. They need to send Max Blumenthal an apology for doing, the real work, asking these electeds questions and then getting shit on, right?
Especially that one Karen. Let's play this video really quickly. They're out here on their time off, fam, to help us out. Yeah, please. Let's play this one clip really quick where Biden vows revenge after he exploits his dead son and the soldiers and everybody else.
Because
and like you said,
ISIS bombed the Kabul airport, according to
Can you give me those quotes again? ISIS
K, to be particular. All right, let's watch the
The
video.
lives we lost today were lives given in the service of liberty, the service of security, the service of others, in the service of America. Like their fellow brothers and sisters in arms who died defending our vision and our values in the struggle against terrorism, of the fall on this day, they're part of a great and noble company of American heroes. To those who carried out this attack, as well as anyone who wishes America harm, know this: we will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay. I will defend our interests and our people with every measure at my command. Over the past few weeks, I know many of you are probably tired of hearing me say it. We've been made aware
SWB audio capture, not registered.
that the ISIS-K, an arch enemy, the Taliban, people who were freed when both those prisons were opened, has been planning a complex set of attacks on the United States personnel and others. This is why, from the outset, I've repeatedly said this mission was extraordinarily dangerous, and on why I've been so determined to limit the duration of this mission. As General McKenzie said, this is why our...
All right, so, fam.
Mm-hmm. What? Okay, so
Oh,
you guys
sorry.
heard the voice of Biden and Bush, right?
Bush together.
Yeah, it's like they merged, and
You're
they
not
actually
with us, fam. You're with the terrorist.
they actually kind of look alike too. But I think like if you understand the history of ISIS and how they came about, this is very obvious and clear. But I found myself arguing with people saying, well, ISIS admitted it was them. Okay, so let's talk about this, because the mainstream media is saying the U.S. was on alert for more Kabul attacks. So they're saying, oh, these next few days are going to be extremely dangerous, okay? And that's what the media spin is. Oh, look, like these poor people, look at what these terrorists are doing. We need to get them out. This has been the narrative every single time throughout history.
Yeah. And this was on the 24th, this article right here. So it was before the attacks. And the thing is about you listen to guys like Ray McGovern, right? Ex three-letter agency guy. Do today's bombings at Kabul Airport have signals of a false flag attack? If prior intelligence was so accurate, why was the attack not nipped in the bud?
SWB
Key
audio
question,
capture
always.
not
Is that
registered.
qui bono? How do you say it? Who profits from killing Americans the most? Biden better ask it before he gets sucked back in. So even Ray McGovern's putting out there that this looks like a false flag attack. You know, it's very questionable. You know, they said it was coming, supposedly. So, I mean, look who profits most. And then also Nick Medhurst put up this particular tweet. And I kind of shared it from his Instagram, because if you haven't signed up for Dick's Medhurst's Instagram, you should. The Taliban was foreign invaders out of their country. They want foreign invaders out of their country as fast as possible. The last thing they're going to do is coordinate a terror attack with ISIS. And some meatheads on CNN are suggesting potentially prolonging a NATO troop presence. So there you go. That's what it is at the end of the day. The same energy as suggesting Assad launched a chemical weapon attack just after UN inspectors arrived, or in 2018, right after the Syrian army won the battle at Ghouta. Just complete utter nonsense, and people swallow this up because they're wearing ties and have nice graphics.
I mean,
LOL.
And yeah, go ahead.
And the last part is just probably a good time to mention the obvious. ISIS and Taliban are enemies, just like Saddam and Al-Qaeda were mortal enemies, and there was no link between them, unlike the mass lying media and national security figures, which would have you believe they can start wars.
Right, exactly. And that article was important because you could tell like they were starting to frame the narrative like something was going to happen. The United States, let's remind everybody that they left behind these weapons suddenly, and then they had recently claimed that they were going to do target drone strikes to get rid of those weapons. So they've been trying to find another reason to get back in there, which is what we said on the show multiple times when people were, Kyle Kalinske and others, so far up Joe Biden's arse that they trying to find some sort of celebration to be happy about, right? And I just have to, we have to just mention this too.
Yeah, because our guest is going to talk about this too. We were talking about supplying weapons to all different facets of the war, all different enemies. Whether in Syria, we talk about the management of savagery, and we even have Mark Sloboda on here. And this is an article right here saying Russia claims the U.S. is supplying weapons to terrorists in Afghanistan and unmarked helicopters. Remember, I made a tweet, fam. The deep state doesn't care if who wins the war, who loses the war. All they care is that we have the war because they can sell weapons and make a shit ton of money, and it doesn't make a difference who they're selling it to. Everybody killing each other, they're just making so many profits. And also, you put up this tweet here from Mr. Ben Norton.
Right. So this is another reminder because they're saying this is ISIS-K, right?
ISIS-K.
And he made a tweet just alluding to the bombings at the Kabul airport in Afghanistan are being blamed on a so-called ISIS-K or the Islamic State Khorasan. Keep in mind that ex-President Karzai, the former U.S. puppet who turned against the U.S., and knows a lot of the secrets, said he considered ISIS-K to be a U.S. tool. And you can read the multiple titles. But at the same time, like, guys, like, the United States constantly, helps create and helps radicalize these groups, and then somehow ends up crying wolf every single time there's we remove troops, and then they see a reason to go back in there, or this was planned from the start. This is something that happens all the time, and ISIS-K is just another representation. And it's really important to point out that ISIS-K and the Taliban aren't friends. So it just doesn't make any sense that the Taliban would, as Richard said, would like risk all of this just because of what? There's no reason. And all of mainstream media has to get on there, and they just have to pretend and say it enough times, and people believe them, and people regurgitate.
SWB audio capture not
and
registered.
et cetera, right? Like,
And now you have Karzai saying it, right? This is a tool. You got the Russians saying they're supplying terrorists with weapons from helicopters. I mean, there's multiple links there showing that. We've heard about this all the time, fam. We heard about it in Syria. Now we're hearing about it in Afghanistan. I mean, what the American empire will do to make sure that we have a continuous state of war is disgusting. They have no concern or love for life. They do not care. All they care about is their profits and their resources, and they've always wanted to keep Afghanistan. We know how rich in lithium it is.
Yeah.
We know how they have those opium fields out there, the opioids. We just talked about it yesterday. So, I mean, you have to keep your eye on the prize. No matter what, at the end of the day, the correct answer is we need to be out of there. We shouldn't have been in there in the first place. We need to get the fuck out, and I mean really get the fuck out.
yeah.
For good. Bottom line.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we can have our guest on. Come on.
Not there yet.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to take a look really quick. We have 173 people watching on
Let's
the
get
YouTubes.
some more. I know this is not our usual time.
Guys, we have about 30 people watching on the Rokfin. Thank you so much for jumping on in. Where's Trey? Somebody get Trey up and get his ass here. Tell him he's late for the show.
I also wanted to just point out when Trump also withdrew from Syria, and they had the ISIS attack that killed a CIA agent. This is very reminiscent of that as well. If you look at that, right? Because like this was in an area where ISIS wasn't even there.
Yeah.
It was a Kurdish area.
Yeah.
So I mean, this happens all the time. And Lindsey Graham, of course, one of the biggest warmongers, was saying the same thing. This is the playbook I that happens every single time, and that's why I want to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
Extensively.
It's crazy too because the American people, if you think about their mindset, they're so detached from foreign policy. It's ridiculous that they just take anything that's given to them. Because you got a person with a nice suit on, like you said, they speak clearly, they must know what they're talking
audio
about. They're laying it out, and they
not registered.
They regurgitate those talking points that the mainstream media give them, and they actually go with it rather than understanding and learning what's going on. I think that's the importance of the guest today, because this group has been on top of this, the Gray Zone, and Max Blumenthal has been on top of this for a long, long time. We even had like Mark Sloboda, and like we talked about it, what went on in Syria. It was disgusting what the State Department was doing, what the CIA was doing. They were actually funding all facets, all different sides in the war. Because what happened, their profits went crazy and skyrocketing. If you look at all the profits from, in the stock market, from all the defense contractors, it's ridiculous. It went off the charts. How long is it going to take before the Americans realize that they're getting fucking played? How long?
And as soon as we left, too, the Taliban were already making deals with Russia, China, and that just goes to show you, like, the United States isn't, it's not where it used to be in terms of geopolitical strength and powers. Like, it's just not.
And it's funny because when you said something the other day, and I was kind of like, well, I don't know about that. And now I'm like, yeah, like there was some type of backdoor deal, and I can't wait to ask Max that question today. Was there some type of backdoor deal behind closed doors between the Taliban and U.S. interests, or was Russia involved or China involved and stuff? Because there's something to really consider right now from a geopolitical sense. Once we are out of Afghanistan, if we get out, because it looks like we're going to manufacture consent to stay in there, especially with the deal that Iran and China side.
I mean, did
signed.
we ever really leave? I mean, we left like the front troops wise, but we said there's mercenaries there. The job market for mercenaries went up as soon as the troops were removed, and that Garland Nixon talked about that, how like that was happening, and that's no coincidence, guys. Like a publicly funded private war is worse, but that's like the foreign policy of somebody like
audio
Anthony
capture
Blinken compared to
not
somebody,
registered.
That's more of a right winger.
It's funny because what's his name? Blinken was saying, I take full responsibility. Well, then quit, asshole. Quit. If you're going to take responsibility, quit.
So while we're waiting on Max, I just want to show you that in St. Paul, Minnesota, line 3, in this morning they started surrounding the protesters. Protesters were outside of the Capitol, St. Paul Capitol, and they slept overnight there. And police came with batons and surrounded them, arrested some people, but now the police are leaving. The state troopers are leaving. At first they put their batons down, and then now they're leaving. But they did arrest some people, and I've been asking in the chat, what are the charges that they're arresting them with? Because over here in L.A., they probably would have done the same charge that they arrested us back in May of 2020, which was LAMC, Los Angeles Municipal Code 80.02, which was failure to obey a peace order. Failure to obey an order from a peace officer, right? Which is which was bullshit. Which is why we're in court for that class action lawsuit still for that. And so now it looks like the protesters are left on are okay to be on the Capitol lawn. I don't know what happened. They called off the state troopers and everything. The permit had ended. They had a permit for staying there till last night, which ended last night, and then they stayed. A lot of people stayed in tents there. And if you don't know what they're protesting, it's the Line 3 protest. They're trying to stop a pipeline from being built, and it's a pipeline that
SWB
has,
audio capture
our
not
guest Steven
registered.
said has what was it, the sand tar? What was it?
Yeah, it's tar sand.
Tar sand. So
Yeah.
then, if you think about it, logistical wise, sand is sharp. The insides of the pipes are gonna get eroded, so there are definitely gonna be spills. Basically, as the
It's like sandpaper inside the inside of the pipe. It's gonna go.
and it's going so
Yeah.
fast, so it's just gonna keep doing
gonna rip open
friction. It's gonna be friction the whole time.
That's,
Yeah, and we're getting no benefit from this. Is not any oil we're gonna use. Not that I want to use it anyways. We're not gonna have a lot of jobs. If there's
It's
any job, it's
foreign.
gonna be for a couple weeks. Once they're done working on that, all the jobs are gonna be in Canada. So there's no benefit for whatsoever. The only thing that we can really gain from it is a negative gain, and that's that oil linking into the water supply in the Great Lakes and all those areas over there.
the Great Lakes are like the main water supply for a lot of the country. So
And they just got a bunch of water reservoirs and stuff right there where it's all running along. So it's like, yeah, it's dangerous. And that's something like when people go, well, why do you consider yourself a leftist? I'm like, because if I was president, day one, I'm banning fracking. And we're moving away from oil.
what about the jobs?
Day
Pasta?
one. Well, yeah, we're going to create green new jobs, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so sorry. But guess what? If we destroy this world anymore, if we destroy our water supply, because I'm going to go mainly about water, because it's really hard to explain to a lot of conservatives sometimes that global warming is definitely a thing. They still, no, it's the Earth's natural cycle. But they can't argue that oil and water don't mix. And that's something you can get across to them. Like, well, if we did just pollute our water supply, we're dead. You can live with days without food. You can't live for days without water. Water is the most important thing. Water is life. In fact, that's the part we should be nationalizing. So we have our guest with us here today. Thank you so much. He's been with us before. I'm so glad he's come back again. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, Mad Max Blumenthal. How you doing,
SWB audio
Mad Max?
capture not registered.
Enjoying a LaCroix.
Oh, so are we.
So are we.
I don't feel as bad now.
Ridiculous. Or is it LaCroix? Which is it?
La Croix.
You're canceled. That's not what
LaCroix
a
X,
socialist would do. By the way, that's so I just right off the bat, Max, I just want your reaction because you went to DC. You asked Cori Bush some tough questions. He also called somebody what did you call him?
He said, you punk bitch bootlicking. That's when I told you he was Mad Max. You see what he said?
Well, these guys tried to clown me, and they were taking selfies. They were these little dorky congressional staffers who were taking selfies with Adam Schiff, like the ultimate warmonger in Congress. And then they came up to me and were like, "Thank you for obfuscating the Uyghur genocide." And I'm like, "Yeah, oh, you really care about human rights? You're taking selfies with Adam Schiff. You're working in the institution that signs away so many lives, that is filled with administrative criminals who authorize sanctions across the world, and you're accusing me of being human rights criminal." I mean, I've just pointed that out to them. I mean, it was kind of infuriating.
Right. So you
And
also
that was their video. Sorry to interrupt, but that was their video they posted that they thought would embarrass me. That's kind of been making.
Oh, I didn't know that. That was their video.
Yeah.
I thought that was your video.
I just thought it was funny the way TYT made sure they used that little snippet to kind of try to go after you. Like, look how distasteful Mad Max is being over here. Like, they purposely used that clip because somebody did take it down. like the next day. I couldn't find it online. So
that was the staffers who tried to embarrass me, and basically like the whole over half the crowd, maybe over 75% on the steps were congressional staffers that the squad brought because they don't they're not really mobilizing a mass movement, but they posted that, then they removed it when they realized it didn't, like I actually
SWB audio capture not registered,
and they appreciated that I was pissed off. And so Anna Kasparian tries to embarrass me with it, like I'm going to be embarrassed by that. And she said the gray zone, which is notorious for deceptively editing video, but then she doesn't say what video was deceptively edited because we've never deceptively edited any video. So her little rant about me, I mean, I barely even, I responded to it in 2 tweets. I'm not going to play into like this sad battle of YouTube personalities that are devoid of any issues. And I think, everyone has this feeling right now that they've never watched TYT, don't even know it exists. And the only time they ever see it is when Anna Kasparian has a meltdown.
Right. They do this for attention. And I just wanted your reaction too, because you asked Cori Bush questions. Also, Franco from there went and caught AOC in a moment. And Johnny, you have his video in the background. But the Supreme Court, of course, has blocked the eviction moratorium with a 6-3 vote. So what, like, how a lot of people were saying this was like a PR stunt, that this was theatrics. What are your comments on now in hindsight as to what's happened today or in the last 24 hours?
Well, we knew this was going to happen. The strategy was marketed somewhat deceptively by AOC. She said, we're not going to play nice. She gathered the crowd around. So we're not going to play nice. We're going to get it in people's faces and make them uncomfortable. And what we want to do is force everyone to come back here and put their name on this bill to kick everyone out of their homes and shame them. She didn't, those aren't her exact words, but she did say we want everyone to come back and reconvene. So she's basically saying we need to force the vote, which is obviously highly hypocritical. And then Chuck Schumer comes down, Adam Schiff comes down, and some of the other more mainstream Democrats come down to show their support. And the strategy suddenly changes to, let's just get the CDC to issue a highly conditional and temporary freeze on the eviction moratorium and kick it back to the Supreme Court, which is controlled by far-right Republicans who are tools of industry. And so we always knew this was coming. And then what they proceed to do, and where the photo op part comes in, the part that you criticize, is that they declared victory and made their followers online think that they actually spared millions of people from eviction, when what they did at best was buy them a few more weeks before the ravages of the free market took hold. So that the declaration of victory with all the, we did it, I can't believe it, and all Cori Bush's selfies and everything, it created a false sense of hope and cleared the Capitol steps and terminated whatever movement was building. And I also have some criticism for like organized groups, socialist groups that can mobilize large numbers of people. They don't really have a right to criticize because they showed up. Some of them may have showed up late in the game and deserve credit for that. But it was an opportunity for so many people with more far-reaching demands, like cancel the rent, to come in and really start to take over the messaging. But they really let AOC and Cori Bush define the messaging and the strategy, which was doomed from the beginning.
I got to tip my hat off to you because I was texting you at that time going, wow, Max, great work. And I was texting Franco, but you were really trying to seize that moment. You're like, this is an opportunity. We need to get our asses to the Capitol now and build upon this to get a rent cancellation going. And, we talked about it on the show before, too, as well. With the CARES Act, while they were kicking trillions upstairs, that was the time right there to plant their flag again, the progressives, and say, we need rent cancellation. They didn't do it. And I'm glad you really tried to seize the moment. I can understand the criticisms towards those groups, because if people really cared, they would have got their ass to the steps and say, let's cancel the rent now instead of kicking the can down the road. So, tipped off to you.
I think, there may be some organized kind of groups that are connected to the squad in the Democratic Party that are going to go protest at the Supreme Court, but it's going to end the same way. And what's needed now is direct action around these evictions. We've seen it before, and it's happening in cities. It's happening in LA.
Yeah.
People actually getting in the way of evictions, defending families. And, I don't want to get into, issues that can't be discussed on YouTube, but why are so many people facing eviction right now? Could it be because lockdown policy destroyed their income and wrecked the economy? And if they do turn homeless, that could result in that kind of excess death that people who sleep on the streets typically experience within 5 to 7 years. So we're talking about lockdown policy potentially leading to excess death. And to talk about that, to say that is still, it's totally forbidden within most left circles. But this is just obvious, staring us in the face. And so people will be like, they're throwing them out in the middle of a pandemic. But that's because of policy choices we made.
Yeah. Let's get a little bit more into Afghanistan, since this is one of your great areas, because they're saying now the new ISIS-K, or the Islamic State, I believe you say Khorasan. I don't know. I thought it was Khaleesi or something, but they're the group that attacked Kabul. But we were just talking about the former president of Afghanistan, Karzai. He called ISIS-K a tool of the U.S. Even reports from Russians saying that they saw U.S. helicopters supplying ISIS-K and other terrorist groups. In your opinion, who's more likely involved? I mean, it seems to be that intelligence is involved, but who else?
Well, I got to say, I can't just claim that there's a U.S. intelligence or deposed Afghan government connection to this attack, even if it benefits them, because the Taliban was calling out the imminent attack. They said this is going to happen. The Taliban is a mortal enemy of ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan, and of the Afghan government that it replaced and destroyed. And they would have called out that intelligence connection if they thought it was there, and they haven't so far. Maybe that's because they're partnering with the U.S. to clear the airport. But what we can say decisively is that ISIS-K has always served the agenda of hawks in the Pentagon and of the Afghan and of elements of the Afghan government. It started out as the Pakistani Taliban around 2010. And their most spectacular attack was highly unusual because they actually recruited a CIA asset to carry it out at Camp Chapman to do a bombing of U.S. troops. So they were able to connect with CIA assets. Their main objective was to drive the U.S. out of the region. They were completely a byproduct of the U.S. occupation and invasion. They were largely responsible for a wave of terror attacks inside Pakistan, which the Pakistani ISI seems to regard as connected to the Afghan government or U.S. intelligence. We know U.S. intelligence has this very tense relationship with the Pakistani ISI because they've been supporting the Taliban inside Afghanistan. And Hamid Karzai made those comments that they always serve the U.S. agenda. When did he make those comments? It was April 2017, after the U.S. Basically, Trump didn't even authorize it. It was Nicholson, the CENTCOM commander. He just let his Pentagon generals do whatever they want. And they decided to drop the mother of all bombs in eastern Afghanistan in the Nangarhar province, which is an area where ISIS-K has had some bases. And it seemed like they were just looking for the opportunity to test this weapon and send a message. And so in order to test the weapon, they had the perfect group to justify it. And it was a major violation of sovereignty for Afghanistan. It wasn't something that the Afghan government was seeking to do necessarily. So Karzai made those comments, and I think we can see now, like with the former CIA director, Leon Panetta, saying we have to go back in, and the whole Beltway media crowing that the U.S. military can't let this stay. The Pentagon suggesting they're going to wage standoff attacks, cruise missiles and maybe more MOABs. So ISIS-K continues to enjoy this symbiotic relationship with the Pentagon and hawkish elements in the Beltway.
Yeah, and just along those lines, when all this whole thing was happening in Afghanistan, and I think you've talked about it in your recent stream with Ben Norton, do you think there was any type of closed deal behind closed doors deal with the U.S. and the Taliban? What might have like the United States gotten away or gotten in return for leaving these military weapons just lying around with this hardware as they were withdrawing? Could it have been opium, lithium?
I mean, it could have also been the recognition that if the Taliban does not secure Afghanistan and impose its will on much of the country, that it's going to become a Star Wars bar for foreign extremists, and that they maybe like there was a rational reason. I don't know if the U.S. necessarily wants to see Afghanistan totally destabilized now as it was during the 1990s after the Red Army left. And then all the CIA assets, the warlords had this war of the warlords for Kabul. It's not clear to me the U.S. wants to see that happen right now. Certainly Russia and China don't. So giving them those weapons, essentially letting them take the weapons, it gives them firepower. And the Taliban killed most of ISIS-K in a series of battles in 2019. The ISIS-K is now headed actually not by an Afghan, but by an Arab who goes by the name Shahab al-Muhajir. And his job basically is to recruit people from around the world to come and turn Afghanistan into like the jihadist Las Vegas. So that's the issue, I think, right now. The opium thing, we saw so many drug dealers in the Afghan government. The Taliban has pledged to crack down. In the 1990s, they did crack down substantially on opium, which is why the U.S. actually, the Clinton administration basically supported them for that reason. But opium has proved profitable. It flooded the U.S. and now it's become a boon for Big Pharma and the Sackler family. That's how they got everyone on fentanyl, isn't it?
Yeah. Eventually, it was most of the people in the United States who took opioids for the first time got it from a doctor. You were talking about some of these leaders right now. The gentleman who's going to be the ISIS-K leader, seems like the 2020 version of Osama bin Laden now, coming over to Afghanistan and recruit. But we see a lot of people going, oh my God, how can we leave the people? It's awful. And then you would also mention some of these Mujahideen leaders back in the days. How bad were these warlords of the Mujahideen and some of these people involved in the Mujahideen when the Russian occupation began and we were supporting them with military-grade Stinger missiles and everything? How awful were they?
Well, a lot of people don't realize that the U.S. began supporting these figures well before the Soviet Union was ever involved militarily in Afghanistan. And it was during the 1970s when there was a major power struggle between the secular camp, the Marxist camp, and the Islamist camp in Kabul. And it centered around Kabul University. So the U.S., through a series of CIA front groups, started backing what they called the professors. And these were figures like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar and Burhanuddin Rabbani, who were professors at Kabul University of Islamic Studies and were going around campus organizing mobs to throw acid on the faces of women who did not wear hijab, who didn't cover. They were far-right extremists that the CIA chose to support. Because why? You don't want Marxists to take over Afghanistan. And there was a serious threat that actually took hold when the government of Mohammad Najibullah came to power and the Soviet Union backed the government. So the US basically gave these figures that they had a long-standing relationship with weapons. Billions of dollars went to Hekmatyar. This was a character who was carrying out car bombs in civilian areas all around Kabul. Friend of mine, a journalist friend of mine, Leslie Coburn, actually had her interpreter beheaded by Hekmatyar's men. Rabbani was another disgustingly violent figure. You had Jalaluddin Haqqani, who's now whose son is behind the Haqqani group, which is an ally of the Taliban. He was getting at least $1 billion from the CIA. Then you had Ahmed Shah Massoud, who is the the hero of the CIA. They thought he was like the moderate rebel. And basically, after the Soviet Union was driven out, all of these characters started fighting over Kabul, and they destroyed at least half the city. The government was basically sold off to the highest bidder, meaning Pakistan's intelligence services. The Saudi Arabia was trying to get skin in the game. The Afghan National Army was basically shipped over the border to Pakistan. I actually interviewed one of the few government functionaries who continued showing up to work in a suit throughout this period, and he described it to me in my book, The Management of Savagery, just what it was like watching his entire country just be stripped to the bone by these psychopaths that the CIA had recruited. So basically, it took the Taliban rolling in these Datsun Technicals that were given to them with Saudi money, shipped in on C-130 transports, U.S. military transports, along with advanced telecommunications equipment to sweep into Kabul and restore order. And they were welcomed by the people because they just wanted someone to act with a heavy hand and stabilize the country. Now, the Taliban had no money. They had the Saudi connection, right? But the country was destroyed. So where does the money come from? It comes through Osama bin Laden, the son of Saudi Arabia, a hero to people across the Gulf for his role in the anti-Soviet jihad. And he's given a little bit their version of a hotel. They eventually move him to like Kandahar because they are uncomfortable with his presence. They don't like what he's doing. They don't like Al-Qaeda and its international jihadist mentality, but they needed the money. And so that is what ultimately created the context for 9/11. And we have to remember the Taliban offered to hand bin Laden over if the U.S. could simply prove his role. That was their demand.
And they couldn't provide any evidence. Is any of this stuff, is this information in The Management of Savagery? Because this is some great stuff.
It's all there.
The first time. Yeah. I got to get it back up on my Kindle.
The book starts in Afghanistan. And, if you read it, if you read the first few chapters, you'll see that this is the current reality that's playing out. This is the reality that the Soviets lived through. And after 9/11, Soviet military officials who directed their counterinsurgency effort tried to warn the U.S. military of what kind of quagmire they were entering, and they were like, "No, but you're the stupid Reds. You're the commies. Like, we do things better. We build back better." And 20 years later, like, what did we build 20 years later?
Speaking of build back better, Jonny, did you put the link in the chat? Yeah. So Max, we have a few questions we wanted to ask you on what's going on with the mandates. So we usually do this whole like Rokfin only, obviously for obvious reasons. You mentioned, you can't. I mean, they will take you down even if you're reading like straight text from like a government document. YouTube, that is. They'll take you down. I mean, if you're independent media, if you're like part of the establishment media, you kind of get away with it a little bit. So we, let me know, Jonny.
We've been through that. So
now you're on Rokfin with us. You, Ben Norton. Is Anya getting her channel on Rokfin yet or no?
I think ultimately in the future.
Eventually?
Yeah, she needs to get through a few longer projects. Like, doing these streams all the time really takes me away from writing, and she's doing some writing projects. So
congrats on the baby, by the way.
Thank you. It's definitely are we just on Rokfin now?
We're 2 seconds away from it.
All right.
We are?
Okay,
all
great.
Right. Rokfin only.
Yes.
You want me to ask the first question real quick, or
well, just on the last comment